Hi everyone, it's Jerry. This is game 14 from the 2023 World Chess Championship match. Ding Liren has the white pieces in this one, and we are tied 6.5 apiece in this race to 7.5. A winner in this game, and we have a new World Chess Champion. Let's have a look. d4 on board. We have a Nimzo-Indian. We had this in game 8, and we follow game 8 until this moment here, move 5. In this game, it's bishop to d2. Game 8 saw a3, and then the capture on c3. Bishop d2 this time around, preparing to recapture with the piece. d5, a3, only now, and the bishop falls back to e7. You could capture the knight, that is an option, but he retreats, and if you are going to retreat, it's best to retreat to this e7 square. Going here would be losing. b4, c5, and the bishop is squashed. And if you go to d6, you're asking for c5 with tempo. So bishop e7 it is. Knight f3. And then black hits with c5. Now, a question I had for myself in preparing for this video is, what if white interferes with black playing c5? Or in other words, suppose white plays c5 instead of knight to f3. How can black react? Well, black could play e5, taking advantage of the fact that the knight is not on f3, stopping this advance. If white takes, black will be regaining the pawn shortly after knight to g4. Both of these pawns are under fire. So its first development, some more control over e5. c5 hits. D takes c5, bishop takes c5, queen c2. At this stage, maybe hinting at a case of opposite sides castling. It's now an option. So too is rook to d1, going opposite the queen. Black releases the tension, recapture, and now carries on with more development, staying strong in a way on the king side. In cases where this knight is undermined, or challenged, as we will see in this game, black is in a spot to reinforce this point. So rook d1, bishop e7, knight to g5. So this is a very challenging move. White is kind of playing this in a very optimistic way. He's going for some kind of attack here. There is pressure on h7, but as Nepomniachtchi pointed out, there isn't really anything that he has done wrong. His pieces stand well. His structure is good. Development is not an issue. From here, the knight is questioned. And similar to game 8, which was a Nimzo-Indian Zamish, we have h4. So this fishing pole idea surfaces yet again out of a Nimzo-Indian. Now, in game 8, it was actually the dark square bishop that was on g5, and then we had this follow-up h4. So yet another piece is up for grabs on g5. In this game, the knight on g5 is poisoned. The reaction in this game is queen c7, but if you're capturing the knight, white would be winning the piece back, and the attack continues. This is a winning attack for white. File's ripped open. The knight can't go wherever he wants. It'd be mate. So this guy is poisoned. Queen c7. Notice the times here. So we have 78 minutes. Nepomniachtchi's reaction spends about, 7 minutes, 6-7 minutes. And now there's a threat against the bishop. The reaction here falls back, spends quite a bit of time there. What is that? About 23 minutes spent on this move. At this stage, he's already on the defensive. It happened that quick. You know, you're thinking a bit more optimistic with knight to g5. You're in an attacking mentality, and then all of a sudden you realize you have to start playing some defense. This was a move that he didn't expect. You know, he maybe underestimated the strength of queen to c7. It does develop. It's also pinning the knight in this case. Rook to d8. Rook to c1. The queen is now defended, so this knight is unpinned. This knight is still poisoned. White will be sneaking into h7, getting the piece back at minimum. The attack, again, would continue. From here, knight to f8. So now this is where the knight has to retreat, now that this guy is around defending h7. So black is ready to bite. The knight gets out of the way. Knight takes knight. Knight takes knight. Queen takes knight was also an option, but we go into this ending. Now the queens are exchanged. Bishop d7, bishop b5. Sort of an admission that, white is not so comfortable in playing bishop to b4. That's what was expressed in the press conference. Have now a case of these doubled b pawns. And now an interesting decision here. Knight c5 played pretty quick. This is giving up the g pawn, a pawn that I'll often reference as the 2-point pawn. What exactly is white's idea? That pawn is taken. Rook to g1. It isn't to get some attack against the king. There will be no attack. But the idea here is to eventually kick this bishop away from its defensive b7. Now, you'll notice after this last move, the bishop has two options. It could go to d5 or c6, but it takes a pit stop on d5 first. Both of these squares can be, I should say, both of these squares can be guarded by white pawns, e4 and b5. If you go to b5 straight away, or excuse me, if you go to c6 straight away, there would hit b5, and then when the bishop falls back, you could take this pawn. However, this square is not weakened. The bishop goes to d5. Black wants to provoke first e4, so that not only d4 is weakened, but so too f4. These are now holes in white's camp. So nearby there can be rook d4. Maybe a couple moves from now we can see a knight in some cases arrive on f4. It's a nice finesse here, this nice little detail to welcome a pawn advance with tempo in this case, in order to grant the rook, in the immediate future at least, in order to grant the rook immediate access to the d4 square. Be very active on this fourth rank. Okay, so bishop d5 it is, e4, bishop c6 only now, b5, continuing the kick. Finally, b7 is up for grabs. Rook is hit, moves forward with the counterpunch. Rook c4, and now the rook exchange is declined. It goes back to d7. Why is this? Well, I think it's because if you exchange a pair of rooks, this guy right here, the king, feels much more comfortable contributing in this endgame. You could think about maybe drifting towards the king side, maybe getting to c5, putting pressure on the a pawn. I'm not saying straight away making some b line like this, but in general, the king will feel much more comfortable playing an active role on the queen side of the board. There is a line where if black goes for this rook exchange, it says go after the h pawn, and white on the other hand goes after the a pawn. Nearby there's this idea to play b6 to flick in some knight d6 move first, but this is the general idea. White is looking to do something against this lone pawn, and hopefully this guy becomes passed. And the white king, there is some compensation for being down the pawn in that the white king is more actively placed than its counterpart. Okay. Black says, I want to keep both rooks on board. I don't want to allow your king to have an easier time to contribute in this ending. Additionally, black may also have been saying with flicking in rook d4 and making white play rook to c4, he's kind of saying, b5 is now unprotected. So when I play rook d7, I'm hitting your knight. And when it moves, and I react here like this guy is now something you must tend to. Okay. From here, rook c3. Black doubles. Don't have too many options. Computer's saying knight b7. Surprisingly enough, is best. Welcome to giving up this pawn, looking to get these pieces out and about. Try to hunt the a7 pawn. White doesn't budge so fast. He plays b4. Black continues to pile up on the pinned knight. White gets out of the pin now, forms this battery against the g-pawn. Now black does have an option here to save the g-pawn. This is considered one of the better moves. It's reading, evaluation-wise, it's around a -1. Okay, g6 is not played though. Black goes straight in for the capture on c5. Black is for choice in this position. He's winning a pawn, white gets it back. King to f8. You must play king to f8. Going right would be the wrong way. Go straight to mate. So king to f8. From here, bishop d3. Now a nice continuation here by Nepomniachtchi, putting pressure on the bishop. You can't just go ahead and chop away on b5 in this position. Maybe tempting to take on b5. Bishop takes, rook takes. We have this check. The rook falls, and we basically get into this completely dead endgame where the a pawn falls. This guy may fall, but pawns on the same sides down a pawn shouldn't be a big deal, shouldn't be so difficult to hold. So, not so fast. Black will try to take this pawn under more favorable circumstances. So it's first rook d8, king e2, more pressure on the bishop, and now white has to play very accurately. He does, with first rook g8, king e7, and now rook 1 to g3. Do you see the issue with, let's say, defending this bishop in a different way, such as bringing this rook here? Well, black would have a trick, and that is to take on d3 with the rook. And after rook takes, there's bishop takes pawn, and basically black is able to go ahead and liquidate into a king and pawn ending where you're simply up a pawn. Okay, that guy's going to score a touchdown very soon, and the white king's going to be preoccupied stopping this guy. So this is a serious threat to take with first a rook, and then bishop takes pawn, putting white in a pin. Rook 1 to g3, white has a trick up his sleeve. The reply to this is e5. Now considered better is rook to b3, close to about a pawn and a half advantage, rook to b3. He went with e5. Now, why didn't he go for this capture right now? That same tactic would not be there because this rook is on the 8th rank and has the shot rook takes bishop check. King takes rook, rook takes rook, rook takes rook, king takes rook. This is considered a drawn king and pawn endgame. So black has a trick up his sleeve if black is trying to take the bishop with the rook. You flick in that check first and only then recapture. Okay. In this game, as Nepomniachtchi pointed out, he was asked about this position in the press conference. He thought e5 in general healthy. You know, you're fixing a pawn on a light square. White really shouldn't like that. Also, no pawn on e6. That means this 6th rank is opened up. So black is now able to meet rook h8 with rook to d6. This guy's now defended. From here, b6, white has a trick up his sleeve we're now going to liquidate into a rook-specific endgame. What's the point behind this b-pawn advance? Well, it opens up the b5 square for the bishop to land a check. Black takes with the rook, keeps the outside, keeps an outside pass pawn, or passed rook pawn. White will have to work that much harder to stop a passed rook pawn than a knight pawn. Now comes the tactic rook takes bishop, king takes rook. Right around here, they are just barely making at least Ding Liren under 5 minutes. The sequence gets him to that first time control with the check. Move 40 has been met. He got 60 minutes. So does Nepomniachtchi. No issues with the clock times, meeting that first control. Rook takes rook. Black is up a pawn, so it's black now playing for 2 results. Black says, not so fast. I don't want your rook to easily enter. Get to the 7th rank, get behind the pawn. So black cuts that out. Rook f3. King e7, rook c3. We're starting to repeat. Black goes for more. He should. He is up the pawn after all. There goes the a-pawn. White rook is very active. And we eventually get the rook right behind the pawn. The black rook gets to the a-file. King g3, there are different moves you could play here. This is one of them, playing the pawn to h5. Why might you want to play h5? Some time was spent on this, about 10 minutes. Playing the pawn to h5, in some lines you could, in general say to yourself, well, if I'm going to, in some lines, maybe win this pawn, and then get back over here, my pawn will only then be 3 moves away, 3 tempi away from queening. So it's worth some consideration putting this pawn on h5. He goes with king to g3. He leaves this guy as is. And he also leaves this guy right where he is. This is an important detail in this ending, having the pawn on f2, not making it, not pushing it to f3. Let's see. Black goes with h5, rook a8. Get these king moves in. You'll notice black was not so fast to push this pawn. As soon as you push the pawn, you extend the scope of the rook. Has access to a5 and then e5. So as soon as a4 is in, rook a5. How are you defending this? f6. King f3. If you're playing f3, now if you come over here, there are these ideas where the rook could play to h1, and if this guy is here and you're capturing on that a2 square, you're going to end up with this skewer idea. So this guy right here is best kept on the home square. This provides a nice shield against this skewer idea. Rook h1 to h2 idea. So he stays put. King f3. a3. Rook a6. This is the ideal post for the rook. It's behind the passed pawn, and it maintains pressure on f6. Now from here we had king to f7, so you'll notice this guy stops moving. If he goes one more step, if he goes to a2, white will be able to hold this position in the following way. He could put his king on g2. This is simplest. I'd like to point out that if you go to e2, white will have to find an accurate idea in the event of f5. Black will have to insert some checks continually until the king is inconvenienced and take in a timely way once the king is not in a spot to stop a capture on f5 and then the pawn promoting. What's the problem in this position? If after king e2, again, we're assuming a2 in this position, and king e2, how should black follow up if this pawn is captured? Black would now be winning with this idea, and this is a really neat idea to be familiar with. e4. What's happening with e4? Let's find out. Let's say we don't give a check. e3. Now what? You take with the king, you'd be getting hit with the check and then promotion. You take with the pawn, now you have opened yourself up to this skewer idea that I've been drawing some attention to for a while now. Rook h1 would hit. The second rank has opened up. There is no f-pawn here to defend against the skewer. This guy wants to be here. So, you could, in this position, meet the move a2 with king to e2. You need to find an accurate move after f5, though. You have to go with these checks. But to play it on the safe side, the king could probably just go to g2, and then this really isn't that big of a deal because you could capture, and even if this guy gets down here, you could simply take. The rook cannot get to this post on h1. All right, in this game, this pawn stays put. The king comes over. Another detail is, let's say, in this position, let's carry it out a bit more. This is a very important idea. There's a big difference between having this pawn on a3 versus a2. For as long as it stays on a3, black retains the option of maybe one day coming over here and ducking these checks on the b file, the c file. He's able to hide in this little pocket on a2 with the pawn on a3. However, if this guy goes to a2, the task to defend goes something like this. We could give checks. Basically, we stay trained on this pawn, and we stay in a spot to meet king d4 with the check. We could give another check. If the king is coming over like this, we get some distance. Whenever the king guards the pawn, that's when we say, no way. Give a check, flush him away, and then get right back. Something like this would be a nice way to draw the position. The king cannot hide with the pawn on the second rank. Okay, in this game, he goes to f7, still keeps this square opened, one day possibly for the king. King f7, king e3, white's going to stick around on these three squares. Black's doing some sort of triangulation. He's trying to get the white king in a not so optimal square, and then black finally goes for it. In order to try and make some progress, you have to give up this pawn. This was the ideal placement for the rook. He remained in a spot where he's saying to black, if you want to make progress, you're going to have to give up a pawn. There goes the f-pawn. And with it, white now has a majority. It's not the healthiest majority, but with preparation, white now has this idea to play f4 and create a passed pawn for himself. Rook b2, rook a6, rook b3 check, king g2. The king approaches, and here we go. Another critical moment. Nepomniachtchi continues to set problems for white. Multiple times now, Ding Liren has had to find only moves. This is another case. There's only one move here, and he needs to find it. Move 65, he does. f4 on board. This creates a passed e-pawn, and this is an important pawn. This pawn will create a distraction for black. One of these two will now be required to stop it. e5, king b7, rook a4, king c6, and this technique is very instructive. You could go ahead and push the pawn. In this game, rook a6 is played. If you push the pawn, I believe this was Ding Liren's fear, and that is the king could get a bit closer to this pawn. You could kind of hide right here and eventually go for this idea where you take and even sneak into g4 really quick. Even if it came down to a position where it's a king and two pawns, and a king and two pawns and both rooks on the board, white would still be able to hold that, but maybe it's a bit trickier. he's looking for a clean approach. So he's not so much a fan of inviting the king towards this f6 square where he could kind of hide behind the e6 pawn. Instead, he wants to cut the king off. What he's saying here is if you play to this square, this pawn is going to run and your king will not be able to stop it. The rook will have to be the one to stop it, and when he stops it, you're going to drop the a pawn. When he takes the e pawn, I take the a pawn. Okay. From here, it's king to b5, rook a7, king b6, rook a8, cut off again. He's trying some other maneuver. It's not working. Another check. King improves. Doesn't want to push yet again. He's going to get to that square, so king f2, king e7, just king moves. This is, again, a favorite square for the rook. It was there staying trained when there was a pawn on f6. Now it wants to stay here to simply cut the king off from crossing while also staying behind the a pawn. So perfect spot, this rook. Very nice, very instructive play by white, this technique. King f2. Are there any other problems that black can set for white? Not really. It's just some king movements. The king tries his luck again, moving towards the white rook. This is when the pawn approaches. 2 steps away. Approaches e8 square. There's no king here. He tries king there, but he's cut off yet again. Not allowed to cross. Can't get to f6 so easily. King e8, king g2. Finally, rook takes e, rook takes a. Pawns now on the same side of the board. Rook g6. Where does the king go? That would be a blunder. Watch out for the skewers. King f2. Rook g4. Rook a5. Pawns on the same sides. King is out of play at this stage. There goes the h pawn. But now the white king is in a great position. The f pawn can now be tracked down. Rook takes rook. We go no further. The draw is agreed before even this move is played. A 90-move draw in this 14th and final classical game. We are now tied 7-7, and we get another day of chess, and it's going to be a big one because we go into the rapid format. Best of 4 rapid games at 25 minutes, 10-second increment. If necessary, we play a couple pairs of 5+3, or if we go beyond that, then we're looking at 3+2. First person to win a 3+2 is the champ. Hopefully we don't get to that speedy time control, but a big tiebreak day ahead. Let's have a look at the tail of the tape. For this one, very high quality again. If anyone was pulling for a win, it was Team Black. Nepomniachtchi setting problems. A very lengthy game. I said it was a 90-move game. It was also a 6.5-hour game, and you could maybe hear it this time in my voice. They were really, they're testing my voice with this match. So we have, at the end of the day, 96% accuracy, 97 for Nepomniachtchi. We're going to see what happens in the tiebreak on Sunday. So, anyhow, feel free, as usual, to leave any feedback to this video in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe took a thing or two away. That's all for now. Take care. Bye.